It's the 20th of June 1997 and Alicia, Frankovich and Golriz Ghahreman are going to be interviewing Maureen, the principal of Auckland Girls Grammar, for the Ag's History Archive. It's 9 o'clock on a Friday morning. Okay, hi, I'm Alicia, Frankovich.
Hello Alicia.
Golriz?
Hello Golriz.
Right, to start the interview, first of all, thanks very much for offering to do this for us. Yeah, it's a great pleasure.
My pleasure.
On your arrival in 1989, what were some of your visions for the school?
I came to the school because it was a girls' school, and I was keen to work at a school which had a multi-ethnic community.
Right.
And so I don't actually think in terms of visions. I'm a very pragmatic, mundane sort of person, and if you said to me, what did you want to do? I just wanted to provide, or to work in a school that provided the best education possible for young women. And I've always believed that there are some sort of key elements. Women need to be competent. You have to have a skill base, you have to have knowledge, you've got a really good brain, you should develop it. In order to do that, you have to be taught a range of things. But you also have to have confidence, and often it's the lack of confidence that doesn't enable women to show their real talents. So I was after competence and confidence. I grew up in a family where the prime principle was you have to care for one another, and I think that's really important. Yeah, I think it's that if you're competent and confident and you're an absolute selfish person, then you may take the country forward and make advances, but it's at a cost to other people. So I believe you have to be you have to care for people. And I think you also have to be socially responsible. You can't just say, I'm going to look after my family and not think about the others. And so for me, I wanted all those things for the students here. And I've always said that women should be able to make their place, that they shouldn't be assigned a place in society. I'm conscious that I'm the first married woman with children to be the principal of Auckland Girls.
Oh, really?
And yes, in all that time. And so part of what I've also wanted to be able to say to the young women here is that the majority of you will choose to be mothers and wives. Hopefully, if you wish, you will also be able to choose to have a career, and you'll be able to blend all those things together. So that's basically what I wanted to do. I wanted us to be sort of a leading school through example, not through rhetoric. I wanted us to show what you could do. And I guess that's what I've kept on about. Yeah.
Great aims. How would you assess your successes in achieving this aim for the girls here?
I think there's been some interesting things happen while I've been here. I wouldn't dare attribute them to myself. There's been a turnaround, I believe, and it's partly the social climate. History, your history students, I too have a degree in history, and what that shows you is that there is a time, that social and economic and political factors come together, and cultures change, climates change. And when I first arrived in 1989, we were just coming out of a very liberal phase, I think, in New Zealand. And we're now in a phase, and have moved into a phase, where it's much more competitive between schools even, let alone between businesses and every other thing. And so when I came, I can remember being appalled at the hundreds of girls, senior students, who had free time and who went up the street, just disappeared. And it was not uncommon to have large numbers of classes with maybe 10 students missing in the afternoon because they hadn't returned, and I just couldn't handle that, and so my reaction was to say there will be no study at all will be punished, sort of, which is not what I believe, but in order to turn it around, you had to take a fairly drastic action. And the drastic action was to say there will be no free time because that way it's easiest to ensure that everybody stays. And I'm quite pleased that we've been able to move back to having some free time in the last year or two.
While retaining the discipline.
Yes, yeah. And I would have to, really lay all the credit for the discipline at this school, I believe, stems from Miss Hatch, who shares the belief that kids are here for a real purpose.
Yeah.
You're here to learn. You're here to look good. Very much to look good.
Of course.
And you're here to be great ambassadors, not just for our school, but for women and for the various ethnic groups that we represent here. And so that's one thing I've been really pleased that we've been able to say. And we haven't just done it through discipline. We've tried to do it. I mean, I've always said
on a personal level as well.
Yes, and also through curriculum. That sometimes people show good mental health if they say, I can't bear this, so I stay away. Staff do that as well. But what we're trying to do is to say we have to make the program such that students will be able to succeed in it if they work. Nobody wants to put in a program where you succeed and it's so easy that there's no satisfaction in it. But I think for some, particularly of our senior students, we didn't cater for them. We didn't cater for the interests they had, for the skills they had, for the aspirations they had. And they responded by absenting themselves. So we were really keen to try and turn that around. And I think, that's one thing. I think another thing that before I came to Auckland Girls, I was actually working at the Teachers College, and I spent a lot of time in schools right around the North Island. And one of the things that I've always tried to, I was impressed when I came here and I tried to retain it, is that I think Auckland Girls is a very happy school for students. Most students like to be here. And so how do you keep a happy school?
And of course you introduced the National Certificate and Modular Studies. Did that kind of broaden the curriculum? So
it was an attempt to do that and to say, hey, changes are coming on a national level and you need to be ready. You have to make wise choices. Again, I think I've always tried to temper freedom with constraints. And so the constraint was you had to choose a course from every learning area. You had to work in every curriculum line. You couldn't do what I had seen students doing previously, where maybe they were doing sixth form English and drama and journalism.
Media studies or something like that.
Yes.
All in the same
all
area.
In the same area. And some of them without any real interest in that. I think at the senior level, one of the courses that I was really keen to get started and that I hope will develop into an even stronger course was the World of Work program. And that caused a lot of debate, a lot of staff debate.
Oh, really?
When we first started it. Because people didn't, or maybe we didn't do a good enough job at saying what we were trying to do. But anybody who works in it, and this year we've had different people like Miss Cotter and Mrs. Edwards and Mrs. Graham was another one, Miss Graham. What we've done is, if you work in it, it just really shakes you up as a teacher because you suddenly see that there are these people who have no idea what they want to do.
Yeah.
No idea what their talents are, what they're interested in. And And if you can get them to start to think about that, then their whole focus on their mathematics, and you could, it's really exciting when you see it happen, or you see people go on work experience and they come back and they say, I don't want to do that. Oh, yuck. You know, and then you say, well, what are you going to do about it?
It gives like a boost.
It actually
Wakes them up as well.
it makes you grow up, you know. And I always say in the seventh form there are sort of 2 steps to growing up, you know, before you have to make a plunge. One of them is the World of Work course, and the second is writing the letter asking for a testimonial.
Oh yeah.
And if you get doing that early enough, people suddenly say, my God, I really am going to have to leave school. And you know, that's been an interesting thing. I don't think we've got modular studies totally under control, and I think again, teachers are very conservative, very conservative, and they tend to like to do what they've done
Previously and afraid to take chances.
Yes, I don't know about afraid, but
Reluctant.
a little, yeah. And I think some teachers took to modular studies and developed really interesting programs,
Right, yeah.
and that other teachers dragged their heels. And you know, one area that I think has done a really interesting job with modular studies has been phys ed, because what we've been able to do there is to offer a whole range of different things.
Right, there's golf and
squash and ball games and fitness and you
Lots
know.
of opportunities to like pick up new.
Yeah. And all of them have got a common core, you know, which is, doesn't matter whether you're playing squash or whether you're doing weight training or whether you're doing netball. You know, the whole purpose is health and fitness.
Yeah. Do you feel any slight maybe disappointments to the decisions that you've made at all, or maybe regrets? Just looking back.
I would think my greatest disappointment is that I have had limited contact with the students.
Right. Yeah. That's
And I've reflected on that for, you know, to trying to work out why. And I think one of the things was that, again, sometimes circumstances take you by surprise. And I came to the school and was surprised to know that we were hosting the Polynesian Festival, the Maureen Pacific Island Festival. And so my other principals said to me, well, you're doomed, you can write off the first term, you know, forget all those goals about kids being competent and being successful, because it will just absorb your whole life. And I was determined that wasn't going to happen. You know, I was determined that the school was going to carry on with this sort of academic focus. And
while at the same time carrying on for the Pacific.
Yes, but that all the organisation would not be done by any of them, and any of the staff. It wouldn't be distracting from their classroom work or anything until we could wait no longer to involve them. And a lot of the festival was organised in this room very late at night by a small group of staff and a couple of friends of mine actually. So that then when we had to start disrupting classes and being on a big scale, it at least hadn't set the pattern that when when I started at the school, all we did was sing and dance and meander around making stages and things. So that was one of them. And then we had the Tomorrow Schools, which was a huge administrative change, and you just felt absolutely tied to your desk as you had to write policies and implement financial systems, a whole lot of things that most principals didn't know how to do, including me, because they weren't part of what you'd done before. And I guess, and one of the other things is that as a student, I'd always thought assemblies were very wanky. And that principals stood up and rabbited on about, pious things, and most people didn't take any notice of them. So you may have noticed I try not to speak unless I've got something fairly significant to say, and I try to make any assembly that I run
Interesting.
a thing that's got.
That's why we've got such a range now.
Yes, but the consequence of that is that probably the students I know best are certainly the ones that I've taught in class, and I was really pleased I made that decision to go back. So that's a regret that I know a lot of the naughty students.
Of course.
Yeah.
I hear your job is dominated by paperwork.
And maybe that's...
Is that a shame for them?
Well, it is a shame, and I think in some schools that wouldn't be the case. To say this really positively. And it wouldn't be the case, I mean, you work with the team you've got and you say, what skills do the members of that team have? Now, Miss Hatch has much greater skills than I have with students, with naughty students, with being a detective, with motivating, I mean, that's her forte.
Yep.
And I have greater skills with the pen. And so we've tried to complement that, and I think we've worked quite effectively. And it's not just Miss Hatch. I mean, there's been Miss Thompson, Dalzell, whoever's been in the senior team. We've always tried to say, hey, what do we do well? And there's great rejoicing when I crack a case of something, one of the criminal cases in the school. They both feel really great about it because it's not all that often that I do that. And I don't get quite as tight about things as others either, so I have to be quite careful that I can sound very cross. Sometimes I've had to go into the cupboard and have a really good laugh in the first instance because even though it's naughty and unacceptable, sometimes things are very funny that students do.
Oh, really?
What do you feel that has been the most significant change that the school has gone through as a whole during your time here?
I think the curriculum changes have been very significant, and I think it's they've been part of a huge sort of ideological battle, not internally at school because our school has gone with them. But they're not secure nationally, and we were always led to believe that they would be implemented, and so there's been a frustration in a way that we've moved ahead, and some staff have been concerned and felt the broadening of the curriculum here has been to the disadvantage of students academically. The examination results don't show that at all. No. In fact, our students have continued to improve year after year. Our top marks have got higher. Last year we had a setback with some of the Pacific Island students, which I'm still not sure why that happened. Whether it's just the group of students going through or what. But that's
something to do with the curriculum. What do you think about unit standards? We were the first school to trial it. Do you think it's been satisfactory?
I'm not sure that we were the first school to trial it.
Okay.
We were part of. We weren't trialling it on our own.
No.
Right. So we joined the maths and trials, and the maths and geography were the first conventional unit standard trials, and we were part of 60 schools or something like that. One of the hassles is when you get to be a bit old and you've had an interest in history, you kind of believe in the cyclical theory, that you just go round and round. And maybe 20 years ago the same sort of thing was happening with the introduction of sixth form certificate as an internally assessed exam. And what happened then was people said, sixth form certificate internally assessed, they worked their butts off. They had all these assessments. Everybody felt totally ground down. And then bit by bit it sort of pulled back as people said, we don't need to do all this. This is logical to do this amount. And I think we've done exactly the same thing with unit standards. Everybody's a little insecure because of the conservatives, the dinosaurs as I would call them, saying, you know, this is ridiculous, people are trying to prove and prove and prove that it's that it's quite legitimate work to do, and that it has integrity and all those sorts of things. And so we're over-assessing, I believe, and grinding everybody down. But I think that'll pass. And what I like about unit standards is that it forces you as a teacher to specify what it is that you're going to assess. And particularly if you've taught history or English, you've kind of been able to mark and say, oh yes, this is good. This is a great piece of work. And then you say, why?
Right, yeah.
See, whereas with unit standards, you know all that in advance. And so when people say it's petty, it's mostly because you really had to struggle to say exactly what it is that you're going to be looking at.
In regards to your recent decision to opt direct resourcing, how do you think that this has affected the school?
Right. I think that the first thing to say is that it was the board's decision to go into direct resourcing, right? It wasn't, I had a part to play, as a board member. But it was not, in this instance, me leading the board. It was a very controversial area, as you know, and there were particular difficulties at this school, and things that had to be handled a little delicately, I felt, because the school had the National Vice President of the Post-Primary Teachers Association on the staff as a senior member of staff, and therefore it was quite important for her personally and also for the union's point of view that our school was kept out of the trial. And probably I wouldn't have cared too much one way or the other. You know, I'm reasonably easygoing.
Do you think it affected the staff relationship?
Oh yes, it did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually accept the PPTA's argument. And principals are meant to be highly refined and polite. But I've always grown up with a slightly rough edge. And one of the things that I know is that I am a very good crack detector. Very good. And I believed that a lot of the national argument fitted into testing those particular skills. And so I intellectually disagreed with the argument that because I believed it overlooked what for me was the most critical inequality that already existed in schools. 75%, over 75%, probably 80% of a school's money is spent in staff salaries. Right? And under the centrally resourced system, there's no control on that at all. And so this school, which can attract and retains teachers, has a lot of teachers at the top of the scale. And schools in other areas don't. They have a lot of teachers at the bottom of the scale because they're much harder to get, harder places to work in. And I felt that was a huge inequality.
We've got
68% of our staff are at the top of the basic scale. And that's even slightly reduced because we've worked quite hard not to bring in, as the PPTA argument was, cheap, inexperienced teachers. No, we've worked to bring in some young blood with new ideas and vitality and, to balance.
That's
so,
important as well.
Yeah, I think so. So, sure, it strained things, and I think it strained relationships because many of the staff believed that the principal should support the staff. And my argument against that really was that you have to work with the staff, but that staff don't run the school,
No.
and the union doesn't run the school, and that for our school, direct resourcing has been an absolute bonus financially.
Yeah, one person really has to have the final say. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that people could not advance the arguments as to what direct resourcing was going to do wrong for our school.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what did you think about the teachers' strikes of 1996?
Well, I have to confess that I was overseas during the teachers' strikes.
Oh, really?
And I tried desperately not to think about school as we were surrounded by guns in Israel or trying to drive a barge up.
Was that from the Fisher Award?
Yes,
Yeah.
the Wolf Fisher.
Okay.
So I was sort of out of a lot of that. I believed teachers needed more money. I was sad that we got into that very heavy sort of industrial action where inevitably the students are kind of fodder. Yeah.
Do you as principals support such strikes from the staff or teachers, or?
Or did you see it more as a negative thing?
Yeah.
Were you worried about the students?
Yes, I saw it as an opportunity. I think that I'm a little bit from the school where I still hold the belief that no doubt my family gave me or that I acquired when I was growing up, that there are certain groups of workers who have obligations that go beyond those of the ordinary worker. And so doctors and judges and clergy and teachers, I'd still expect them to have a sort of slightly higher moral code and sense of social responsibility than some car salesman. Yeah. But the tragedy is that often those people, because of that sense of social responsibility, have always been disadvantaged. And the teachers proved, I guess you could say, that they only won success when they took a heavy-handed approach. And I don't think the teachers in New Zealand had been on strike for 20-something years, had they?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's not something that they just go on strike every day about.
I'm just changing the subject a little bit. What has been your most important memory at ACTS? Is there something you could sort of...
Special day or just...
I can remember one disaster that I'm a relatively shy person, and while I'm quite happy to speak in public, I don't choose to take a front. I don't like to be a star all the time. And Dorothy Winston, who you will know is a former student of the school and has done an enormous amount for the school, has made a day. And it was decided that a group of, that the places that she'd worked been closely associated with, the University of Auckland, where she'd been on the council for many years, and the Federation of University Women, somebody else, maybe the Methodist Church, and ourselves would honour her, and we had this huge gala occasion. It really was everybody in their splendour. And I was emceeing it. And I had worked so hard on it. I had never worked so hard on putting together a little speech and making sure everything was right. And I was getting dressed and looked down, and I had laddered my stocking. And I thought, my God, Miss Hatch will kill me. I ran up the street and I asked for a pair of stockings. Right? Now, I didn't want a pair of stockings at all, of course. I wanted a pair of pantyhose. But it was 5:30. The man fossicked around.
Was this at like the K Road Dairy or something?
I got a pair of stockings. I rushed back down here, went to put the stockings on, had nothing to hold them up with.
Oh no.
So large sellotape. I endeavoured to attach the stockings while I was meant to be meeting the Governor-General and his wife who were at the thing. And before all of this had taken place, I had gone down and practiced in the auditorium and had the microphone, everything was set up, nobody was to touch anything. And so I breezed on with my sellotape stockings, tearing the skin off and smiling, and everybody was in their finery, and the Governor-General was here, and the police, and it was just members of the university. It was the elite, so they told me. And this magnificent speech that I had worked on so painfully. I finished the speech, and then someone said, "We can't hear at the back. Would you turn the microphone on?" And I sort of thought, if anyone had said to me, that was my absolute nightmare, because I wanted it all to be so lovely, and I often laugh about that. So I'm fairly much more relaxed about things now. There's been lots of good memories. I mean, there was the day we, as I mentioned, we hosted the Maureen and Pacific Island Festival, and we were the first girls' school to do that. We were the first school to do it off-site. We did it at Western Springs as opposed to holding it on our own grounds. It was a very controversial situation, and there was a gentleman who'd been associated with the festival for many years, and he behaved, I thought, somewhat inappropriately, and so there was great controversy over whether I would speak, because women couldn't speak on the pie that was created.
So what year was this?
1989. I'd been principal all of, 2 months or something, and all of this controversy had blown up over something that really wasn't anything that I thought was my business. And anyhow, and of course the staff here was saying, you must speak, this is a girls' school.
Who was opposing exactly?
His name is Kipper Sterling. He's a fairly well-known gentleman, Maori gentleman. And so it was decided that I would speak if I spoke under a cover. Right? And again, it was for me one of those stressful things where I got a speech together. I'm standing under the cover, and the microphone is out there.
Oh gosh.
Where I can't go and get it, because the compromise was, as a woman, you'd stand under the cover.
Oh gosh.
And so then someone gave me a handheld microphone, which then went, static in conflict with the other one. So that was sort of one of those situations that was a bit scary. But then I stepped out to have the school sing the Waiata. And people had said, the students won't come, they're only live. Our students were there, en masse, looking magnificent. They sang, and there were people weeping in the, in the gathering, because your back hairs, or how you get that really creepy feeling. It was just overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming, and it was one of those just magic moments where you felt that hey, this school is a place that you're prepared to die for, which is what it's been at times. And so I guess for me, most of the memories I have are of occasions when I've felt extremely proud to be associated with such a neat group of people, and it can be a whole range of things. It can be at a sports game, it can be at a debating, it can be when you see kids they're just so
enjoying themselves.
Yes, yeah.
Small victories.
Lots of little small things where you walk around and people smile and say, "Hi, miss," and people from other schools say to me, "Why do you allow children yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful. And I say, no, it's not. It's not the least bit disrespectful. It's part of who we are. And they're the things that I'll probably, always cherish. That, and I know when I was showing applicants around for the principal's job, there was this really, it's a fairly emotional sort of thing, but I was just so proud of, this was a really purposeful place. People were in class, people weren't hassled, there was very little, there was only maybe one class that you'd go past that had that slightly rude tinge. You know how sometimes classes can get that little bit that the teacher doesn't have the control. Other classes, there were people bouncing around, doing things, role plays, dramas, kids working, maths. It just seemed as if it was a place that had a focus.
Hopefully you'll see one of these moments at your leaving assembly.
Oh, good.
At your concert.
That's another occasion when you go to big occasion assemblies. Whenever we take our kids out, you're always proud of them.
How did you go about choosing your successor? Just going back to
Yeah, I didn't actually have anything to do with it. Not at all, no. It's a decision that's made by the board, and my contribution was really just to host the...
show them around.
And answer any questions at all that any applicant might have, so that they would be well prepared for the interview and the process of completing their application form. So I put together some information, did a profile of the school and those sorts of things, but I had no part whatever in choosing.
Were you surprised to hear that Liz Thompson got the job?
Probably not surprised. I guess one of the things that often people look for an outsider to be a principal, and pardon me, so I think that was an original expectation that they would look for an outsider, and I always think that often you should look quite carefully at what's inside before
you look outside.
Before you discard, and I'm sure Ms Thompson's going to do a really, really neat job,
I think we should basically conclude there. Okay, thanks very much for doing that.
Good. Well, it's probably be full of ums and ahs.
That's okay.
Just great.